Hi there, it's me, Jordan Van Haslo. Welcome to Jordan Van Haslo and Friends live on Hot 702.5 FM Las Vegas. Let's get on with the show. Welcome to Showtime with Jordan Van Haslo and Friends on Hot 702.5 FM Las Vegas. We've got an incredibly dynamic guest in the studio today. Well, I guess he's not in the studio, but he's on with us today. And he's someone whose life is a masterpiece of creativity and innovation. Since 1996, our guest, Lucien Harriot, has been the driving force behind Mechanism Digital, a New York City-based studio renowned for its award-winning visual effects, animation, and next-gen media. Lucien is not just a creative visionary, though. He is also a technical director who pioneers advanced workflows to push the boundaries of content production. Now, under his leadership, Mechanism Digital has become an industry trailblazer in CGI and VFX, serving a diverse clientele from blockbuster films to medical education and corporate communications. Lucien's agile problem solving and quick decision making have guided technical artists both in the studio and on set, and he's always been forward thinking, harnessing the power of AI in post-production to enhance projects, which we're going to talk a lot about. But Lucien is more than just a maestro of digital arts. He's a VFX supervisor, an avid sailor who enjoys racing and family overnights on the water, a pilot, a DJ, and a Rubik's Cube mastermind from the 80s. His life story is like no others, with experiences ranging from summers in nudist communities to living in a Tennessee school bus and an Amsterdam houseboat. He runs marathons while guiding a blind runner. I do want to ask him about that. He's volunteered at Ground Zero. He's reveled in the creativity of Burning Man. He's survived high-speed motorcycle chases and even enjoys night scuba diving with sharks. He's a published author, an experimental photographer, and a concert sound engineer. He's also a dedicated mentor, firm in his belief that the best way to learn is to teach. He enjoys math, puzzles, and singing. He's been arrested, awarded, and does all his own stunts. A proud member of both the Visual Effects Society and the Producers Guild of America, his studio has racked up numerous awards, a testament to his exceptional blend of technical mastery and creative innovation. So with that said, Lucien, welcome. And where the hell do we begin?
Wow, what an intro. Thank you, Jordan Van Haslo. It's good to be a friend of your show. That was quite the bio. I have to tell you that AI helped me write that. I didn't write that all myself. So but we'll get into that later on. But thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you're here. So I want to, it's so funny, as I was like, really kind of like learning about you and your background, you do so many things. You meet so many people in life who they almost can't describe what they do in like one sentence or one job title. Like I remember years ago when I used to heavily perform in the legitimate theater. This is ages ago, before like social media and all of that. And I remember being at this party and this woman handed me her business card. And on one side, it was printed with her name and her phone number and like an email address. And it was like singer, actress, comedian, author, motivational speaker, puppet master, ventriloquist. And then you turned it over. Disney princess for private parties. And there's so many different things. And it's like, wow. Like, so if there were one word to describe you and what you do, is there a word? And what would that be?
Wow. Yeah, it's sounds like she needs a 3x5 card instead of a business card. But somebody earlier today called me a renaissance man. I thought that was kind of nice. So very flattering. I kind of do a lot of little things, a lot of maybe I'm a jack of all trades. So I'm not sure there's a single word, but having a good time and trying to make the best life of it.
There you go. Did that come from I know you were raised in New York and in Soho. Does that come from kind of like a childhood and a youth of kind of just being surrounded a variety of just creative and interesting people who are all doing a variety of things at any given time?
Yeah, well, I guess that. I'm sure that, we're all a product of our experiences. And I did grow up in sort of the Soho loft scene, lots of artists in the 60s and the 70s, people like Donald Judd, and other folks that were in this play group and a food co-op that we belonged to. It was very hippie in the 60s and 70s. And people had lofts and lived in strange places and kind of did what they wanted to. And I think being exposed to that taught me that you didn't have to do things the typical I don't know, the TV show, trying to think of an example, very typical sort of lifestyle, and you could just kind of do whatever you wanted. So I'm sure that helped to inspire me to do that stuff, and now I continue to do fun things, and I'm just having a good time and trying to surround myself with inspiring folks. So
Yeah, that's a really cool way to live. Were your parents in the business or in the arts or in entertainment, or were they kind of hippies, or like it's always interesting to me to learn, because like you meet a lot of people, and like especially because so much of the folks that we talk to on this show are in either the arts or entertainment and media, and I find that you either have parents who are like very supportive and kind of push their kids to kind of like move beyond their boundaries and explore and create. And then I speak to a lot of people who have the opposite experience, where their parents are like kind of want to put a net over them and like pull them back and say, hey, yeah, go to B school. What was your experience?
So my parents, they let us sort of walk around Soho and learn about stuff. But my dad was an engineer, electrical engineer, and so he wasn't really an artist. But I did learn a lot of technical and how to fix and how to build, and to be comfortable with technical things, and that's helped me a lot in the industry that I'm in computer animation and building studios and a recording engineer. My mother was more probably the artistic one. She was actually a carpenter. She was the first woman carpenter in the union,
Oh,
and
wow.
she worked at the Waldorf Astoria. It wasn't particularly artsy over there, but she would have to repair cabinets and things like that. But when she came home, she would work on some art type projects. But I would say more of our friends were the artists. I guess my parents were a bit of hippies, and that's where the communal food co-ops and stuff came from, and the people that we hung out with. But the parents were not artists per se. They weren't into music, and a lot of us as kids, we go the opposite direction of our parents. So I didn't actually pursue art. I pursued more technical computer type things, but I was always amazed by computer animation. And then when I was introduced to computers, I realized there was a tool I could use to help me make artistic type things, but I would approach it from a technical approach. Building something like a CAD model or a wireframe of an object using accurate measurements and accurate lighting and accurate cameras, and then the computer would help to draw the picture for me. So that was, I came from a technical side, never really had a creative or artistic training in any school or such. Just kind of fell into it for fun.
That's so interesting. I mean, just as we were talking before, we signed on, and Jose, it's so interesting. So, like AI, particularly, it just seems like it's kind of just the next evolution of everything you've always done. This is how Jose was like, I want to keep my job. The computers are
Yeah.
going to take him over.
It's so right. AI is the dream come true for me because not having the creative, I've been running my company for almost 30 years now. So I've been around creative, and I am the creative director for my company. But without the training, I never learned how to draw or paint. I take a lot of photography, so I understand composition, but the AI ability to generate images has been this dream come true, where finally the computer is this tool that can create imagery for me, beautiful imagery, imagery far beyond something that I could draw or paint myself. So
Right.
it's been a lot. It's been exciting. There's also a lot of scary things. It's competing with me. There's a lot of people out there that can now make images who don't have any, also don't have any artistic background, and haven't been in the business for 30 years and can generate images. The hard part is getting it to generate what you want exactly, and what a
Mhm.
client wants. So, but it's an exciting tool. It is just a tool.
Well, and that's I think that that's interesting how you said like there's now all of a sudden like everyone's kind of like jumped in the field because it's like, oh, I can create this. But I think it's sort of like I think anytime technology comes to art, like at first it seems like a free for all and like everybody can play in the field. But I think the key, like the cream rises to the top, right? Like I firmly believe, um, like prompting is gonna be like kind of like the next thing. Like you remember how like when social media came about, all the major companies, it was like, ugh, Facebook, give that to like my assistant, let them
Mm.
handle the Facebook. And all of a sudden, 5 years later, those 28-year-olds were like the VP managing like the most important area of the marketing of the organization. I I kind of feel that like AI prompting is going to be that the skill of being like a very skilled and very adept and very specific AI prompter, I think is going to be a very a profitable and long term career field for a lot of people as we move
Absolutely.
forward.
Yeah, and it's prompting is the new art, I think, or prompt engineer would be the title that people are using and throwing around. But I think we all need to learn how to be good at prompting, and to create anything. It could be, I mean, we're talking about art right now. You could also create poetry. You could also create the new cure for a disease, because these tools just know how to search around and look for everything that exists out there and compile them together. And there's a lot of arguments as to whether the computer is creating art. I try not to get too much into that argument because I think there's a lot of art created by humans that people are arguing isn't art. Back to, was it Duchamp who put the urinal in a museum and said that that was art, and a lot of
Totally.
people questioned whether that was, so we can't even agree amongst ourselves what is art. But
Yeah.
the prompting is the tricky part right now. AI might help us with that in the future as well. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, so I want to talk more about AI, but I kind of want to kind of understand kind of like how you got to where you are. So you started Mechanism Digital quite a while ago, but how did that even come to be? So you didn't come up as a quote unquote artist per se. You were more of a computer nerd, yeah, kind of like a techie, kind of like you were really into more the information technology and the informational science of it. How do you go from that to, you know what, I'm gonna start a studio.
Yeah, I hear that. I don't think I decided
You
one
know what
day.
I mean?
So
It's like I
yeah,
like math. Let me go into advertising. You know what I mean? Like where how do you make that leap?
yeah, I always loved math growing up as a kid, and my dad bought me a computer when I was 12 years old. It was this Radio Shack thing, and it had 4 kilobytes of RAM, and we had to save all of our programs on a cassette tape. Those old audio cassette tapes,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't even have floppy disks yet. But I used to play around and learned how to program some tiny programs. And they tended to be things that made pictures or images or patterns. I loved fractals and the concept of making these beautiful math patterns. So I fooled around with that for a couple of years, and then we got something called an Amiga, and then I got a PC at one point, and I would
Mm-hmm.
play with it all night long. I would work during the day. I was working at a studio, recording studio, as well as a company repairing audio equipment. I always loved audio as well. I never learned how to play an instrument, but always worked around the technical side of it. And all night long, I would play with these computers. I'd set up a scene and I'd set it to render. It would take all night to render, and I'd check it in the morning, and then I would change it, and then I would go to work, and it would be rendering all day, and I'd come back and I'd check it again. And that was just a hobby. But I went to some film festivals, and I saw the Pixar Luxo Junior. This is the lamp that hops around, the baby lamp and the mother lamp, and they're playing with a
Uh-huh.
ball. And this always I thought was beautiful, and I realized, wow, they made that with a computer. I wonder if I could do something like that. And a few weeks later, I fell into an opportunity. There was a recording studio or an animation studio that wanted to build a recording studio. And I traded them a month of my time to build a recording studio and to put it together. In turn, in exchange for a month to be able to play on these machines they had, they were Silicon Graphics. These are these $100,000 computers that I would never have the opportunity to play with. There wasn't any schools teaching this yet. This is very, very early on. Now schools have all sorts of programs, but this was early. It was only in scientific communities, and some of the bigger universities had this. But they were a New York company, and I helped to build the studio. And a month later, they let me play around with the computer. And then at the end of that month, I started showing them how to do some stuff. And they said, "Hey, are you available to freelance?" And so I started doing a little bit of jobs here and there with them, and just started to get to know more, and then helped a company sell these computers. So it's kind of this strange path where I had one of these computers at home because I would have to practice on it to help them sell it. They called it a value-added reseller. So kind of boring, but I basically was the demo jockey, was another term for this, where I would show
Uh-huh.
companies this is how it works. And then I started doing little jobs on the side. So it kind of slowly just kind of grew. I had a friend, Mark, who worked at the museum, and he didn't want to be at the museum anymore, but he was an artist. And so I brought my best friend, who was an artist, and he helped me to make things look cool where I understood the technical side of it. And then after a while, the word got out that this guy in the East Village, I was living on First and First, had an animation studio up in his apartment, and could get things done for relatively low cost compared to the big editing companies out there. And the clients grew. And here we are 28 years later. So that's still doing it. And we're a bigger company now, and we work with people all over. But it's been an exciting ride. And anything from commercials to feature films to medical explanations. These are the types of uh, clients that need the computer animation or CGI, computer generated imagery and compositing that we do. So
Right. Right. Oh, that's so like fascinating. I think that that's so fascinating how it just all happened like very, very, very organically.
mm,
So just in terms of okay, so you have clients, you start getting this business, so you have to start scaling your business, and you have to start hiring, animators, whether they're, employees or freelance. You have to start. Was there ever like an awkwardness, or was there ever like a disconnect, like not coming from like the artistic, the side, coming from more of like a technical background, and um communicating, or getting your vision across to folks who are maybe more like artistic purists, if that makes sense?
yeah, good
Or was it
question.
just more a matter of like your check's clear, so they're like, okay, whatever you want, boss?
There was at some point, well, the computer programs were also evolving very quickly, or slowly, depending on how you look at it, where you had to be more of a technical person early on to create these images. And the interfaces was a lot of typing and programming, but these GUIs or graphical user interfaces started to become more popular, and more artist friendly. So the artists were now feeling more comfortable using the computers, and it didn't need to be somebody who had a more of a programming background like myself. And I was able to now hire people who were much better at art than I was. And I found myself being the person comfortable to talk with the clients and describe to the client the different phases of a project and what they needed to approve at different parts of the project. It's very important that we get a lot of collaboration between the client and ourselves, so we don't just lock ourselves in a dark room and then 2 weeks later come out with something that isn't what they were hoping for. So I shifted my responsibilities to being that go-between, which was a producer in many senses, or a creative director, or a technical director. It depended on the project, or all three at the same time. And the artists were the people that I had to find people that had a good eye and some good talent in terms of drawing or understanding how the 3D software and compositing worked. So this transition of the computers and the software, it ended up being a perfect opportunity for me to transition into being a business owner, which now means I'm doing more spreadsheets and emails and sales. But it also meant that I was sad at first. I was afraid I put myself out of the artist job that I always thought I wanted, but then I realized that it just made my paintbrush bigger and I could work on bigger projects with more people and have a more collaborative um, uh, business and lifestyle and
Experience.
projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Then that I love. I love the collaboration and I love the people that are so much more talented than I am. It's my job to find those people now.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have like a preference in terms of, we're not like, digging on clients, but do you have like a preference of like, oh my gosh, we got this particular type of a job in. I love working on these types of jobs. Like, are there certain types of clients or certain types of projects that just really get you excited and going more than others?
Yeah, and you'd be surprised. We work on a lot of feature films that are New York based. We don't work on the big Transformers and the Jurassic Parks, but we do some horror films and a lot of dramas that are based in New York. And everybody thinks that those would probably be the more interesting films, the creative or the more interesting projects, the creative projects. But surprisingly, it's the corporate and maybe the medical projects, corporate communications that are more interesting to me because they come to us for the creative aspect of it. And they come to us to help them with their strategy and figure out what's the story to tell or what are the visuals that are to tell their story. We work on the movies. They're really cool and it's great to mention at a cocktail party. But we're more like a service agency or like a Kinko's, it feels like sometimes, where we just have to remove the green screen from the background and insert a particular image, or remove the microphone that got in the shot, or remove the logo that was in the background. And they're fun. I'm not complaining about those projects, but the corporate and the medical projects actually have a lot more creativity in them. So I enjoy them more. A lot of the artists we work with get very excited about the feature film. So we have to find a nice balance of those. And
Hmm.
then the last decade or so, we've been doing a lot more of interactive and AR and VR and touchscreens, and that no longer is a passive sitting back and just watching, but now it's each user can choose their own adventure and play with it. So now we're getting back into the programming that I had started out learning. So it's those are exciting too. But it's funny. It's the corporate work that people
But that
often
makes sense
scoff
because,
at. Yeah.
but they're coming to you as that, because like if I get that makes sense because like if I'm like a production studio and I'm like we're a bunch of creatives now, it's just like, here's your checklist, make this happen for us because we know what our vision is. So that makes total sense. You just mentioned VR, and I find VR fascinating because I remember like when VR really started kind of becoming a thing. And like, and not so, when I say a thing, I mean like all of a sudden the studios were investing in VR companies. And I remember the very first time I ever experienced VR, I used to be the head of talent for E1, and I had to go up to the corporate office in Toronto. And E1 owned, I don't know if they still do, but they owned a VR company called Secret Location.
Hmm.
And I remember this is like right when I first joined the organization. And so I was like meeting all the heads of everybody, blah, 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 blah. And I went down a secret location and they were like kind of like walking me through like what they do because I knew nothing about VR. And they were walking me through what they do. And they let me like play around with some of their like content and programming and such. And I thought it was really fascinating. Um, where do you think VR is going? Because it seemed like back then, because this is a while ago now, like this is, long, definitely, pre-COVID and all that. This is a while ago at this point. But like it seemed like there was almost like a push to really make VR like not just like a direct to consumer thing, but almost like an in-home thing, kind of like smell-o-vision, what they thought smell-o-vision would be. But it seems like that sort of it didn't quite happen in the way that people thought. And it almost seems like like now everyone's talking about artificial intelligence, like in the way that I feel like they were talking about VR back in the day. Is VR, as far as being a direct to consumer business, do you think that that's dead, or do you think that that's coming and it's still evolving and it just hasn't made the connection as to how it becomes something for everybody in their homes?
Yeah, I think VR is going to be big, and it's sort of taken a little bit of a back seat to AI because AI is moving so quickly that it's in the news a lot.
Mm-hmm.
VR, we did hear about it a decade or a couple of decades ago. It was very new, but then the technology wasn't fast enough. It wasn't light enough to put on your head. But then as the computers got faster and smaller and the screens got better, they realized they could make these VR headsets, and a few companies were pushing it, and it was popular with some video game players, and it's still popular, but it seems taken a bit of a dip, but it's going to come back in a big way. I think it's hard to imagine sometimes living in VR all day long. But I do think that is going to happen once they get small enough, and it can fit in your glasses, and you're going to be wearing your glasses. They're going to be sunglasses or eyeglasses, and then you won't have to keep pulling your phone out of your pocket. It's going to become
Mm-hmm.
this very archaic thing to be pulling this brick out of your pocket all the time and looking at it and squinting at the text. If you could have the text up in the upper corner of your eye and you could read it while you're walking down the street, or you run into somebody and you
Because
forget
that's
their
one way to
name.
not get hit by a bus.
Yeah. We'll have to
I'm
see how
sorry.
safe that is. But it'll help you, it'll warn you that there's a bus coming, or it'll help guide you. It'll be there'll be a map and an arrow that shows you where the gas station is or where the nearest bathroom is in the mall. And it's people are going to the old-fashioned people pulling their phones out of their pockets are going to look silly that they keep looking at this little object. So I think it's going to be big. Whether or not it's going to be that's augmented reality, really what I just described, where
Mm-hmm.
there's an overlay on top of the world. But I believe that you'll be able to switch between the two. Maybe VR is something that you do spend more time playing with at home, and you no longer need a big movie screen on your wall because it's going to be built into your glasses. You won't have to buy a screen for your computer any longer because all these
Mm-hmm.
screens are now going to be either as big as you want or as small as you want, and you can move them around, kind of like Minority Report when they're sort of moving,
Mm-hmm.
sliding things around with their hands. And Facebook slash Meta has made a big push for that, and he's gotten knocked back a couple times. But I think they are still going to lead a lot of that. And then Apple
Mm-hmm.
has a new headset they're coming out with. They're still fairly expensive, but we know how the computer costs go down tremendously in just a few years. So I think in a few years we're going to start seeing that. You'll be sitting in your driverless car and self-driving car, and you'll be on your headset, either looking at entertainment or doing work or a little bit of both at the same time. And there'll be some interesting ways where you can have conversations with each other. Like many of us are working remotely. We're no longer going into the offices. My company is completely remote, and we look at each other on Zoom all the time, talking to each other. But if we could all have headsets on and feel like we were in the same room, that would be a more compelling, exciting experience. And looking at
Mm-hmm.
the body language, and not that you can't see that on Zoom, but there's something about feeling like you're in a room with somebody where you feel a little bit more of a connection. But then you can just drop out and then go get lunch in your own kitchen, and then you come back in, and we'll be dropping in and out of meetings all the time with these avatars or these. And you'll be able to, you don't have to get dressed up, but you can change your avatar's outfit. And we see that with the kids, wanting to spend all this money on digital clothing and digital hats and digital masks and things that they can wear when they play Fortnite. And I think this is going to continue into the business world, and you can put on a happy face even if you don't have one. And it'll be big. VR is not dead. We're going to see a lot of it, and it'll be the norm, I believe. Some people say, "Well, I don't wear glasses." Like, well, I'm sure some people didn't wear shoes originally either, but we
Totally.
all
And
got
all
to
of a sudden, it's like it's what you do.
yeah, yeah. Well, we found out there's a lot of benefits to it, right? So it's
Yeah.
even if you don't need glasses, you will want to wear them.
do you feel you talked about, because this is a conversation we've been having a lot. When I say we, just like friends of mine and colleagues of mine, particularly post, COVID. Now that your company is completely remote, do you find a difference, or do you like, because I think about like when I started my career, right? When you're young and you're starting to build your network, so much of my social life kind of overlapped into my business life, right? Like, oh my God, we're all gonna go have happy hour after work today, or oh, we're gonna go take so and so to lunch. And oh, we're all at work. So even if we don't work at the same company, it's like, all right, I'm getting off at 6. Let's meet for dinner, versus now, like when everyone just kind of is at home the entire time, and it's like, well, yeah, do I really want to go all the way into the city, or do I really want to go all the way over there? Have you noticed kind of like a difference, being completely remote now, in terms of how people interact and how relationships are built and maintained?
Absolutely. It has made a change. There's definitely the pros and cons. You're right. If at the end of the day, it's so easy just to stay standing around in your pajamas and not, get out and go meet some people out at the bar or restaurant. And so, and even during the workday, not being next to each other and having some little chit chat and stuff. There's something that we're definitely
Totally.
missing. So we have a couple of days a week. We call it co-working time, where we all turn on our cameras and we're working, but then we start chit-chatting, and sort of it flows in and out of social and work. And we do that for an hour, and that helps to build a stronger culture because we don't have that because we're remote. There's some of my employees I've never actually met in person. But we get to try to get beyond that with the camera. But you're right, there's something that's been lost, and it's sad in these digital lives, and we all have to work a little harder to make sure we get outside and do something. And I end up hanging out with a different group of friends than I would. I'm no longer hanging out with my workmates because they might be on the other side of the country. So I end up hanging out with other friends that I haven't seen in a while. So try to make the best of it. But it's changed a lot, for sure.
Yeah, like I always think about like those relationships, because like we could have a daily 30-minute Zoom call, but it's not the same as if we every single day happen to like always go for the coffee machine at the same time, and like
Mm.
just kind of like, oh my God, what were you doing yesterday? Oh my God, I was at my kid's little league game. Oh my God, he actually started. He's a starter now. Like all those like little, I don't know. I find it really interesting. I go back to Jose saying, I want my job. I feel like we're like, as a humanity, like I feel like we're evolving into something else, and I think that that's what everyone's scary about, right? Because like change is different. Like change is scary because you've always known something, or you've always thought that, okay, this is the way it'll always be. But I do feel like there's like an evolution happening, and if we all come back a year and 150 years from now, the world is actually going to look a lot different than it did in the 80s, 90s,
I think
aughts, 2010s.
humans have a need to be social, and they will find it one place or another. And some people more than others. And back to the VR, I think once VR becomes the norm, we will be dropping in on each other and having these social conversations in a virtual space together. So we'll get
Mm-hmm.
the same mental stimulation and the feeling of belonging with our friends. We just might be sitting slouched on our couch, and not it's not a healthy place to be physically, but I do believe that we'll all find the mental uh, sort of grouping and gathering that we need as humans. And I think VR will bring that back because it'll be very easy to all of a sudden switch and be in what feels like the same room with somebody who's on the other side of the planet. And it'll bring a lot of people even closer together, I think.
Yeah, totally. So how are you really going back to AR? How are you really kind of like implementing AR into the work that you're doing? Jose sent me. I keep saying Jose. You'd think that like I get a royalty every time I say his name. but but he sent me that deck that you put together about AI and how to prompt and how to how to best use it. How are you implementing AI into your business, right? With the clients you work with and the projects you work on. And so this is a two-part question. So A, how are you doing that? And B, say someone who's like a novice or someone like uh Jose, who is like scared of AI, like where should they start just to just play around with it? Like I've played around, like if I play around, I actually love Chat GPT. That's a whole other story. But like, I play around with some things like where would you say, like, okay, if you are the uninitiated or you're a little nervous about it or you don't understand it, like where would be how would you where would be the first place to kind of start dipping your toes in it?
Good questions. So where we use it in our business, and I'm pushing it a little bit prematurely. AI doesn't always work as predictable as we would hope. It makes beautiful images. It makes wonderful text. And you mentioned ChatGPT. You want to try something fun is ask it to give it a few facts and tell it to write a limerick for you or something or a poem. It does an amazing job writing these things. But it's sometimes hard to get exactly what you wanted, especially an image. So for the types of work that we do, creating images for films or for corporate work, we use it in the early stages of brainstorming, where we let's say a doctor, there's an education for medical, new pharmaceutical. They've done some research and they want to teach these doctors for their continuing medical education. We're going to deep dive like Fantastic Voyage down inside the human body and look at how a cell and a virus are interacting, and then how this new pharmaceutical drug comes and it saves the day. And we have to brainstorm some ideas of what this might look like. We can type in words. This is the prompt engineering. We can type it into the AI engine. I would suggest you hear a lot about Midjourney. Midjourney is a little scary to play with at first. You can just go right to Bing or what they call DALL-E. That's the name of their AI engine. And
Mhm.
just go to Bing and ask them to create an image for you. And you might search for the word DALL-E, DALLE, and it's basically the same thing as Midjourney, but it's owned by Microsoft. And just describe some sort of an image, and it'll create it for you. Sometimes this is off-brand. Most of the time, this is off-brand for a client, but it's a great way to brainstorm ideas that we had not thought of. And then the hard part is to keep prompting. You basically you change words in the prompt, and then you run it again, and then you try a different word, and you run it again, and try to influence what it's going to look like. It's like talking to a junior artist and asking them to draw a picture, and then you say, no, a little bit more blue, no, a little bit bigger,
Mhm.
no, a little bit to the left. And the AI image generation, what they call diffusion models, will do exactly as you tell them. But then you start realizing that you may not be using your words as clearly as you thought, as your mind's eye had it. And the hard part is now how to convert what you're thinking of into words to describe it. Uh, but so we use it to brainstorm, but then very rarely do we use it as the final output for something. We've been using it as the early stages. Then we often has to. It creates a flat image of a beautiful scene of a virus and a cell battling it out in the bloodstream. And then we have to go back and build this as a 3D model and do 3D animation. So that's where the human side comes. There are some tools now helping to build 3D models using AI and texturing, which is the color and the outside look of something. So there's lots of tools where we can speed up the different processes in which we use to generate our final animation. In fact, every software that we use, like Adobe, Photoshop, they are all implementing AI in different ways. And so every tool now has kind of been supercharged in a way. They all are running on high octane fuel, and we can get our work done faster and cheaper, which means we can do more work, which also means that it's going to drive the price down. So we're all going to end up doing twice as much work, which I find exciting, that we're going to be able to produce twice as much content in the same period of time. And it'll all look more, we won't be toiling over the hard parts as long as we used to. Hopefully it doesn't replace us. And that's why, as artists, and that's why I'm spending a lot of time prematurely trying to work with the AI so that we learn sooner than it replaces us, how to use it, how to leverage it as a tool. So we're using it, I would say, everywhere that we can. And in fact, we have on Fridays, we have what we call New Tech Fridays, where all of our employees, we get together and we show each other some new stuff that we saw. It's just so many things are happening so fast out on the internet. It's really amazing.
This sounds like it's like a big nerd app. Just like everyone get totally geeked out about
Yeah,
like, oh my
yeah,
God, I've been playing
yeah,
around with this thing.
yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we're a bunch of nerds when we on that day, that's for sure. But then in the interest of art, so and if you're just starting out, again, DALL-E is a nice place to just start typing in some words and ask for an image and see what kind of thing it creates. ChatGPT, I meet people that have not tried ChatGPT. It is an amazing tool. You can sit and have a conversation with this or ask any questions, and it'll give you all sorts of information. It's not always
But
perfectly
it'll
accurate.
like make things up though. Like
Yeah.
real talk. Like I had it. I needed to put together a bio for myself. And again, like you said, a big part of it is you need to be like you need to be specific. Like I think what makes it so great is it'll give you everything that you put into it, but you need to be very specific. But I remember it was like it kind of started making things up. And if there weren't Google, it made me sound really, really fabulous. But
Well, you are fabulous, right? It was right. It wasn't wrong. It's as in any industry, we'll probably all spend less time creating and more time doing quality control. We all still have to be the subject matter expert when we're using AI to make sure that the AI is going in the right direction and not, yeah, making us all look more fabulous than we actually are.
totally. So are there any specific projects that you are working on or that you have recently worked on that really excite you that you can kind of tell us about?
Okay. We just finished. It's been difficult in the feature film business.
Yeah.
But we
And
did
nothing's going
have a
on
yeah, but we
but
did
the
have
rent.
we did have a project that kind of dragged on for a while, and we just finished it a couple of days ago. And this is with Chiwetel Ejiofor. Am I saying his name
Uh-huh.
right? So it's called Rob Peace, and it's a film about a guy who I forget. He grew up in the hood, but he ended up going to Yale, and it's kind of a sad story. And we actually ended up using AI in this film, where he had dreads at one point in the film, and then he had cornrows at another point in the film, and they re-edited it, and there was an inconsistency where we had to change his hairstyle, and we were actually able to do that with AI, where AI helped us to redraw his hair. So that was
Oh, that
kind
was
of
in your deck,
interesting.
wasn't it? I feel like I
That's
saw that
right.
in your deck, like where he
That's
like
right.
had dreads and then all of a sudden he had like cornrows or something like that.
That's right. Was able to match his facial, the angle he was looking, and it gave us, well, we actually had to generate 100 different hairstyles until we finally found the one that we liked. So in the end, it might have been faster for us to hand paint it, but we learned a lot about the AI and the process and where it works and where it doesn't work. So so that's why I'm pushing to use it, even if it's not the right tool just yet. We definitely want to see where it works and where it doesn't. So, um,
Totally.
and yeah, we've got some other medical projects. Um, I don't know. I don't know how, again, they don't sound exciting, but we get to play with the creative. So when we do those projects, which I do find is a lot of fun. But the one you'll hear about is Rob Peace. That's the one that'll come out in the theaters at some point. So, oh, and also Stamped from the Beginning. This is a project with, not going to remember the name of the author, X, what's his name? He wrote a book that was a bestseller on New York Times. We're doing all these interviews on green screen and then putting them on other backgrounds. Abram X, what's his name?
J.J. Abrams?
No, no. Ibram X. Kendi. So he wrote
Okay.
a book called Stamped from the Beginning, which was a bestseller. I don't know, probably 5 years ago or so. And this is now going to be a documentary on Netflix. It's effectively about the history of slavery from early on in is it Spain or and then through now, and sort of how it's changed and not changed over time. But that
Okay.
one is it's probably going to be they're going to be doing a big push for that one. That one is a documentary, so it doesn't follow a lot of the same writers strike rules. So that was something that we were still working on even during the writer's strike, which was good. So
Yeah. And I imagine that that's it's just thinking, and again, this is kind of like a tangent, but now thinking about, because you don't just do films, but you have like medical clients and like corp cons and things, that had to be nice to have such a diverse clientele, particularly during something like the writers and the actors strike. And it must, that's actually a boon to not be
yes.
beholden to a single industry.
Yeah, when one industry is slow, sometimes the other one is gets very popular. So during COVID, a lot of the films got shut down because people couldn't film together. So everybody was home, and so a lot of medical corporate communications got very busy because everybody was at home watching videos. And so all these corporations, instead of doing trade shows and other outdoor type content, asked us to create a lot of extra video. So it is good to be to have multiple industries to keep us afloat. I think that's been one of the things that has kept us going for almost 3 decades now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So so you've as I had mentioned in my introduction to you, you've had this you have this wonderful business that you've sustained for almost 30 years. You've done everything on the planet, it seems. Is there anything that you haven't done? Is there a bucket list thing? Is there an experience, a vocation, an avocation that you've never had a chance to dip your foot into that you'd love to be able to?
Gosh, I'd
It's like,
like
no,
to,
I've done everything.
well, you know, I love sailing, and I'd love to sail across the ocean or sail around the world on very
Mhm.
long trip. I think that would be something that would feel like a challenge that would scare me, and that draws me to it, and I would love to try that at some point. Sailing across the one of the oceans usually takes about 2 or 3 weeks, where you're seeing nothing but just ocean out there, and you weather the storms, and you have to deal with rationing food and not going crazy by yourself. I don't have to do it by myself. I'd like to do it with loved ones or friends, but that would be something I'd really
The
enjoy
question
doing.
is, at the end of the trip, will they still be loved ones and
That is a
friends?
good question. I've heard many times that
Well, like
doesn't
I
always
always
work
think
out.
about that as exactly kind of like the idea, because I always think about that as the kind of the idea of like when people are like, let's take a road trip. And in my mind, I think the first like 2.5 hours, the road trip is the greatest thing in the world. And then at like 2 hours and 32 minutes, you kind of look at at who you're with, and you look at the nothing but corn and highways, and you say, what was I thinking? But now you're in.
Yeah, whose playlist are we listening to now?
I
Yes.
love it. I could talk to you like literally all afternoon, but we do have sponsors. Thank God. So we're gonna have to wrap up soon. But I have another question because again, there's so many questions I have of you, but I can't let you off the phone without this. Talk to me about you're a genius when it comes to the Rubik's Cube.
The Rubik's Cube. Is it a genius? It's something that back in the 80s when it came out, somehow I ended up with one. It probably was a Christmas present or something. And I must have been about 13. I don't know, how old was I back then? And just found that it was mesmerizing, just kind of fooled around with it. And it took about a month to figure it out. This is nowadays, you can go onto YouTube and you can get some hints and see how it's done. But back then, they kind of kept it a big secret. And people who knew how to do it didn't share their secrets. And so again, I've always loved math. I've always loved any sort of puzzle. So this was a lot of fun, just sort of fooling around with it. But I did start realizing that I started thinking about the world the same way. There's a lot of patterns that you have to do. Turn these sides of the cube a certain number of the times left and a certain number of times up and then down again. And I started realizing that other things I was doing in the world, if I was washing the dishes, I would move the dishes in the pattern of the Rubik's Cube, and I was afraid it was taking over my life. But it was just a fun puzzle, and everybody always seems to be racing. I can do it in about a minute, which is not particularly impressive when you see kids do it in 6 seconds, literally 6 seconds. And I'm not going to try to reach that speed, but I have actually a collection of about 10 different cubes that sit on my desk, and I do them, especially when I'm in very stressful meetings. I'll kind of keep one in my hand and be spinning it around, and some of them have 3 sides and some of them have or 4 layers, and some of them are different shapes, and so I still find a lot of joy, but they're more of like a stress toy for me than anything else, kind of fooling around. But yeah, that was a chunk of my life that still sits around, I guess, even since I was 13. Not many things have followed me through all these years, and that's the one thing. Even the logo of my company looks like a Rubik's Cube, I realized the other day. So I guess it's just deep in my psyche. I'm not going to shake it for a while.
I love it. I absolutely love it. This has been so great. We have to chat again. Tell us, like, where can we, I know you also speak and give lectures. Like, where can we find you, your organization on the World Wide Webs?
Fantastic. Yeah. My company is called Mechanism Digital, so mechanismdigital.com, and you can see the kind of work we do there. And my email is just Lucien, Lucien. But I'm also on LinkedIn, and that's a good place to see the AI talks that I give. I've been giving them every few weeks as AI evolves, and it's a lot of fun just teaching. I find the best way to learn something is to teach something, and so I figure if I keep teaching AI, then I'll learn it as fast as possible, and that's a lot of fun for me. So I've really enjoyed this talk, Jordan. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a fun trip down memory lane, and good to talk. So
Absolutely. Thank you. And you're more than welcome to come back anytime. And thank you all out there in Radioland. We'll see you next week for another episode of Showtime with Jordan Van Hazel and friends right here on Hot 702.5 FM Las Vegas. Hi there, it's Jordan Van Haslo. Yes, that Jordan Van Haslo. I don't know if you know this, but everyone's favorite radio show and podcast is now available on Spotify. That's right. Showtime with Jordan Van Haslo and friends. My weekly one-on-one chat with some of the most interesting people I know in entertainment and the arts can now be streamed on Spotify. I share real estate with Joe Rogan.